In this lesson we will cover VMware ESXi installation. So this is the first lesson where you're going to get your hand dirty and start seeing the product in action. So in this lesson I'm going to show you how you install the VMware ESXi hypervisor, and we will see actually how you do it step by step in real life. Alright, so just a reminder for what VMware ESXi is. So VMware ESXi is the VMware Permittal Leading Hypervisor. And as I mentioned earlier, when we say Permittal, it's actually non-hosted hypervisor. So it's installed directly onto the hardware itself. There is no operating system or host OS sitting below it. So as you see here in the house, as showing in the diagram below, you'll notice your server, which is your hardware. Directly on top of that, you will install VMware ESX or ESXi. In our case, we're going to use ESXi as we said earlier in earlier lesson. VMware ESX has been depreciated, and ESXi is the way to go going forward. So that's what we're going to be working with. Alright, so in this lesson, as I mentioned, I'm going to actually get one server where I'm going to actually put the ESXi CD, get it installed, and show you how it's being done step by step. Then in later lessons, we're going to see how we actually could utilize this VMware ESXi machine that we installed, as well how we actually could go and create virtual machines and what virtual machines look like and how they run. Alright, so before I start the installation, there's actually a few prerequisites that you have to make sure your server is meeting before actually you go and plug the ESXi CD and get it up and running and try to install it. The first thing, you have to have a 64-bit x86 CPU with at least 2 cores. LAHF and SAHF CPU instructions must be supported. You require a minimum 2 GB of RAM for ESXi to work. In reality, you would never install it in a server with 2 GB of RAM. Usually you want probably 16 GB of RAM plus, just to make sure that you have enough capacity to run quite a few virtual machines. Remember, your virtual machine resources is nothing but a chunk of the resources the server have. So if you have only 2 GB and that 2 GB is utilized by the ESXi hypervisor, you're left with no much resources or much of a RAM to actually assign to your virtual machines. So having 16 GB, if you have your VMs as 2 GB each, that will give you about 7 VMs to run, maybe 8. Support for hardware virtualizations. So your CPU actually need to support hardware virtualization, and that's in the Intel it's called VTX, and AMD it's called AMD RVI. Either one will work. So if you're actually having an Intel CPU with support VTX or an AMD CPU with support RVI, both of them will support it. Alright, so if you actually, this is kind of a summary of what's required. If you actually want to look at the detailed list of prerequisites, I have included the link here, and if you go to that link, I'm gonna show you what it looks like. So just quickly. So as you see, it's actually full, all the prerequisites, what kind of, as well as storage controllers, what kind of network cards and so on is supported. Alright, so let's go back to the presentation. Alright, so the second thing as well, VMware have came up with a great compatibility list, which you can check your physical box against it. So if actually you're going and buying a server from one of the top vendors like IBM, Dell, HP, Sun and so on, you would actually be able to go, rather than having to check a piece of the hardware, like rather than having to check the CPU, memory, and every other piece of it is compatible with VMware, you could actually go to this link here and check that particular server as a full against the compatibility list. So let's look at that. So you can choose which version of VMware ESXi you're installing. So let's say VMware ESXi 5.1 update 1, which is the latest version. Let's say actually you want to try to install it in an IBM Blade. So what I have to choose is a Blade. Then I could choose the vendor as an IBM, and I could do update and view results, and here it will show me all the list of all the Blade servers that IBM make that's compatible with my ESXi 5.1. So if I go and get any of these, I know it's supported, I know it works. If I need to actually check just a particular CPU or memory type or so on. I could actually choose an all here, then I don't have to change. I could choose an all, then I could choose the type of CPU and make sure like which type, if it's supported or not. So then I could done search, and it will show me it's supported and which kind of blade and stuff like that. So please make always sure that your server and your hardware is on this compatibility list before you use it for production. Because if it's not there, it might be not supported, and when you call support, you might have problem getting support for it. So make sure the hardware you're buying is in this compatibility list. As I mentioned, most servers from top vendors like IBM, HP, Dell, and so on is actually on this list. Just it's worth it to make sure always before you go and buy the hardware, it's there, so you make sure it's compatible, it's performed up to best practice, and so on. Alright, so while for a production environment, you actually want to go and make sure the hardware is in that hardware compatibility list. You want to make sure it's professionally ready as well production ready. For your home lab, you actually don't have to go with the full compatibility list. You might actually go and build a white box. There is a lot of white boxes have been tested by the community, and a lot of it have been published in several places. So if you actually want to create a home lab and you don't have the budget to actually go and buy actual servers that's in our compatibility in VMware compatibility list, you want to actually go just buy a white box, and you can actually probably build a decent white box for about $600. Here are some resources that could help you, and some sites that could help you actually build your white box. So these particular sites actually have been specialized in finding which hardware that's compatible with particular ESXi version, and they have tested it. They might use it for their own home labs, and it's been reported by several users. So rather than hitting in the dark and trying to figure out if actually the machine you're buying and the hardware you're buying, will it actually work with the VMware ESXi or not, you could actually go to any of these sites and figure out what hardware they have tested and go buy some of these. As I mentioned earlier, I mean, one of these white boxes could cost you in the range of $600, which is pretty decent. So you can actually do most of your lab work with it. Not to mention as well, if you have a decent laptop or a recent PC, you may actually be able to install VMware Workstation and install the VMware ESXi on top of it for your testing and lab. For my own lab, which actually we're gonna do the demo, and it's actually I have two white boxes at home that I have built, and that's where we're gonna go and try to install the VMware ESXi in a second. So we're gonna go and pop one of the VMware ESXi CDs in, and we'll see the installation process. Okay, so lab time. So let's get our hand dirty and see how it's being installed. Alright, so the first step in getting VMware ESXi installed is getting the ISO image of the VMware ESXi so we can use it for the installation process. For that, you head off to VMware website, so vmware.com, as you see on the screen. You go to support and download. Just click on it. Then you will go to the link, which is here, VMware vSphere Hypervisor. Hit download free copy. Then as you see, that's have to take us to the download VMware vSphere Hypervisor ESXi page. And next to the VMware vSphere Hypervisor 5.1 Update 1, hit download. You will need to use your VMware account. If you don't have one, just create a free one using the create an account. As I have one, I'm going to use my current account for that. Alright, so it asks me you'll have to agree to the term and fill any left and answer questions. And now you should get actually to the download link as well. You should get a temporary license that you could use with your hypervisor. So write that down somewhere on a notepad. So I'm going to keep it here in a notepad for me to use in the future. Alright, so I'm going to actually go ahead and download the VMware vSphere Hypervisor Update 1 binaries, which came as an ISO image, as I mentioned. I'm going to use the manual download. Alright, so I'm going to leave it downloading, then I'm going to burn a CD with it. Then after that, I'm going to show you how you go ahead and install it. So we'll proceed as the download completed and as I complete burning the CD required. Alright, so let's start the procedure of installing VMware ESXi. So actually in the previous step, as you have seen, I have downloaded the VMware ESXi from VMware.com. I burned it in a CD, and now I have it and it's ready to be installed in my machine. So I'm going to plug the VMware ESXi CD into my machine, as you can see. I'm going to reboot the machine. And I have configured the boot order actually to boot from the CD-ROM first. So I'm going to go into the BIOS and show you where. So I'm in the BIOS at the moment. In my BIOS I have to go to advanced setting, which is S7 in my BIOS. A very specific feature that I wanted to show you that you have to enable in order for you to be able to install VMware ESXi. So that would be, you go to advanced, CPU configuration, and you'll see like the Intel VT feature, like the Intel Virtualization technology feature. I have to set it to enabled, so I have done that as enabled. And then the execute disable bit as well, you want to enable that as well. So that's two things you want to make sure all is enabled. You got the execute disable bit as well Intel Virtualization technology. They are in different location and different motherboards whenever you go to the BIOS. So you'll have to figure it out in your particular server or particular hardware where they are, but usually they are named the same. We usually find it under the CPU configuration itself. Alright, so that's have been said, and now that you know that you have actually enabled these in the BIOS. Let's restart the machine again and start the installation. Alright, so I'm gonna restart the machine as I have enabled my Intel Virtualization. As well, I enabled my disable execute bit. So now rebooting my machine. Okay, so my option is, the first option is ESXi 5.1 standard installer. So I'll hit enter on that to start the installation. So as you can see, the installation has started. It started actually loading the software modules that required by VMware ESXi. The nice thing about VMware ESXi, it takes about 10 to 15 minutes to install, so it's pretty quick. It doesn't have too many questions during the installation, so you're not prompted for too many things. Actually, the main thing that we're gonna get prompted for, as you would notice during the installation, is the user ID we want to use, the password we want to use, as well what IP configuration we want to use. Everything after that, we actually work on it remotely, so you don't have to keep visiting the server room or the machine that you install ESXi on. So after this particular lesson, we actually don't have to visit the machine itself anymore. We will do everything remotely from going on from there. So So the installation screen is getting a bit more colorful and trying to load all the installer and the required modules. Okay, so I get the welcome screen for the installation, and it's actually warning me that the only supported system for VMware is is hardware that's in our VMware compatibility list. And they tell you that it might work in so many other hardware that's not in the compatibility list, but to get support, that's the only one that would be supported. So as you mentioned in the earlier lessons, you want to make sure your hardware is in the compatibility list, unless if you're doing it for a home lab. So hit enter on that. Then the next thing I'm asked is to accept the license agreement. I will accept by hitting F11. Now it's scanning my hardware. Now it's asking me which device I want to install VMware ESXi on. So I have only a single hard disk there, so I'm just going to choose and hit enter. Okay, this option actually shouldn't have as many options as I have here. As this box had VMware ESXi installed before, it's giving me the other two options of the upgrade and then install and preserve VMFS. The option we really need, we want to do a fresh install. So you're going to do VMware ESXi, override VMFS data stores. In a fresh installation, you probably even will not get prompted, so that's fine. Just choose that, hit enter. Choose a language. I'm going to stick with the US language and hit enter. I'm going to enter a root password. As you can see, it's scanning the system again for additional system information, figuring out what hardware it's had and what's hard disk and stuff like that. So let's do. Alright, so now I'm prompted to confirm the install, so I'm going to hit F11 to confirm the install. As you can see on the screen, it's telling me F11 to install, so I'm going to do that. And it started installing now, watching the progress bar. And as you see, it's installing the ESXi. It's about 90% done. Alright, so as you've seen, the installation has been completed successfully. And the only thing I have to do now is to reboot the box and configure an IP. So let's hit enter to reboot the box. You want to make sure actually you pick up your CD from your CD-ROM so it doesn't reinstall after it reboots. So I just picked it up, as you see. Back to the screen now. The system is rebooting, so it's trying to start up the VMware vSphere or VMware ESXi for the first time. Alright, so as you can see, VMware ESXi started for the first time. It's loading. Alright, so it's loaded. Everything is ready now. The only thing actually left is to configure the IP address for the management of the ESXi box. So if you see at the bottom here, it says hit F2 to customize. So that's what I need to do. I'll hit F2. Now it will ask me for my username and password that I have actually configured during my installation. So the username is root as usual. Then the password is the password that you have entered during the installation. So I'm going to insert my password. Alright, so now as you can see on the left side, I get to the configuration menu. So I'll go to configure management network. Then at first I'll go to the network adapters. Here you want to make sure you're actually choosing a network adapter that's connected, not disconnected, so it's have actually a network cable connected to it. So the first one, as you see here, which was chosen by default, was disconnected. So I have to go down, scroll down by the down arrow, then choose the second one by hitting space. Hit space on the first one, so I remove that. As soon as I finish that, I can hit now enter to OK it. Then after that, I come back to the same menu, choose IP configuration, hit enter, and now I just will have to enter my IP configuration. So like the IP address I want to use, subnet mask, and default gateway. So I'm going to use static IP as well, as you can see here, and we'll fill the IP address here. 168.255.255.255.0. I need to enter my gateway as well. Okay, so now I configured my IP address, my subnet mask, and my gateway. I could just hit enter to save this information. Then you get back to the same menu. All you have to do is hit escape, so you revert back to the menu before it. To ask you if you want to restart your management network. Apply changes and restart management network. And to do that, let's say hit Y for yes. So I'm gonna hit Y for yes, and that's gonna start it. Then again to the same, back to the same menu. I usually like actually, although it says starting it, I usually like to restart it again. So I'll choose restart management network one more time, and you'll be prompted if you really want to restart your management network here. Restart management network, and to say for OK, hit F11. So I'm gonna hit F11 here. And now let's say hit OK, enter for OK. So now with that I'm done. So let's test my management network now. So I test management network. I choose an IP that's I want to ping. So here is just like ping address. And I'm going to choose 192.168.2.1. That's my gateway. So let's see if that works. Okay, so both my ping and resolving the name have worked successfully, which is good. So now all I have to do is exit, so I return back to the original screen. But this actually we conclude the ESXi installation. So now I have an ESXi server that's installed, and the rest of my management and the rest of the lab that we're going to do is going to be done remotely. So as long as you have installed your ESXi machine, you can figure the IP address, username, and password for it. After that, you can get that machine and work and everything else remotely. And that's what you're going to do in the next lesson. You're going to install these 3 clients, connect to the machine, and start creating virtual machines to show you how to